this time.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I thought a lot of what I do is to talk about Bitcoin and crypto finance in general, especially to the media, and it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And I also teach this stuff. So what I'd like to do today is to go through what I call Bitcoin myths and facts. It's not a comprehensive list. I just want to go through some of them. Many of them you know are myths or facts already, but nevertheless it gives you a sense, I think, of the questions that people are asking, the perceptions, and this is so critically important to actually the future of cryptocurrencies or crypto finance, is that people actually understand what's going on. So let me just start with this great quote that's at the beginning of Schmidt and Cohen's book. The internet is among the few things humans have built that they do not truly understand. Okay? That's probably true, but if people don't get the internet, how are they supposed to get Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin is indeed, there are even further hurdles to understanding what actually goes on with Bitcoin. So I've got a list of things I can go through, and some of them might seem, as I say, a little trivial, but you'd be surprised at the perception. The first one is this picture. And we've all seen it. And actually, if I did a poll right now of the general public, and I'll even make it a special poll, only people that have heard of Bitcoin, I believe that most of them think that this is a real picture, that these physical Bitcoins actually exist. So let's just talk a little bit. In my course, I talk a lot about the history of currency. And indeed, the way we started was with barter. So before currency. And barter is completely decentralized, but very inefficient. You have to find somebody that actually wants what you want to trade. So the person, you want something from somebody, they need to want the thing that you're offering. And there's a matching problem. It's very inefficient. So currencies actually arose in part to deal with that problem, that inefficiency. And there's three different types of currencies: commodity, fiat, and digital. So commodity is pretty simple to understand, and it was kind of the first currency of note, and people understand gold and silver. Indeed, gold doesn't even need to be tied to a regular currency. So you can have a transaction mode in gold where you actually, items are priced by their weight in gold. So let's say a gram for something, or a half a gram. So it's very easy to understand. Gold is scarce, it's expensive to mine, and it's easy to get. Now, we don't have the gold standard anymore. August 1971, the US left the gold standard, and almost all countries, all large countries at least, are off the gold standard. The last notable country is Switzerland, to leave the gold standard. Fiat currency is easier to understand than Bitcoin, but still more complex than a commodity currency. People generally understand the idea of legal tender, that in the US you have to accept dollars. Okay, by law. You cannot refuse a payment in dollars. They kind of get the idea that there's a printing press and there's a certain amount of money out there. They also understand if you print too much money, that will lead to inflation. So this is pretty well understood. But with Bitcoin, again, people think of physical Bitcoin. They see the Bitcoin ATMs, which are now kind of called BTMs, and I think that this myth is just perpetuated. Indeed, the Bitcoin community uses terms that are associated with physical currency, like wallet So again, people think, oh, the Bitcoin wallet must have something actually physically in it, when it's definitely not the case. So I believe that the media definitely perpetuates this misunderstanding. It's obviously a myth that physical Bitcoins exist. There are, in a very rare circumstance, some firms have actually made tokens that have a private key on them that can be redeemed for a Bitcoin. That's kind of the closest thing, and frankly, there really isn't a physical Bitcoin. I have to deal with this all the time, indeed, when I talk to the press. Number two, people are confused by the so-called founder of Bitcoin. Indeed, February relaunch of Newsweek, they had this story that they found Satoshi Nakamoto living in California, and then there was a lot of back and forth. The story was discredited, but it's very mysterious as to who the person is. And it is something that's always in the press, it seems. They want to know who the founder is. And I think the reason for that is that if we had the name of a founder, like Elon Musk, it would give instant credibility to Bitcoin. But the fact that the founder or group of founders is so mysterious, and kind of know they're sitting on Bitcoin, it kind of adds to the mystery and takes away, I think, from some of the credibility. And indeed, it's almost a joke. There's memes all over the place on Nakamoto, and I think that this kind of works against. So it is a myth that there is a single founder with this name. Actually, the person in California might be one of the founders, but he didn't write the key paper. That paper I read that paper. It's written by somebody who's got experience publishing in academic journals. And I've got that experience as both an editor and as an author. And the person they identified is just extremely unlikely to sole author that paper. Okay, number three, and this is also a myth. Bitcoin is mainly used for criminal activity. Okay, and indeed, at the beginning, there was a lot of talk, in particular, about Silk Road. And this is just a screenshot. You probably can't see it that well with the size of the screen. But basically, the goods here are all quoted in Bitcoin. So one hit of LSD quoted in Bitcoin. So you use a secure browser like Tor, log into Silk Road, and use your Bitcoin to spend on drugs or whatever illegal good. So there's a perception that Bitcoin just enables criminal activity, and I believe this is a myth. And of course, Silk Road was closed down. It's a myth because actually, if you want to do criminal activity, use cash, like currency. And is there criminal activity with Bitcoin? Yes, but it's a huge problem. It's a much bigger problem with currency. And I've got two questions that I think the answer might surprise you. So the first question is, what proportion of all of the cash in the US, what proportion in terms of value is $100 bills? So I know I don't have a $100 bill on me, and I doubt that anybody's got a $100 bill on them. Indeed, if you go to a retailer, you can't even use a $100 bill, or even a 50. They'll say, we don't take them. Okay, so given those hurdles, what proportion is in $100 bills? The answer? 78%. Huge. Okay, the other question, and this is some research of Ken Rogoff. What's the average wallet size in the US? So simple calculation, all the cash, divide by the complete population, like everybody, man, woman, child. What's the average wallet size? I know my wallet's got about $40 in it. $4,000. Okay, so it's a joke, right? So we don't have the $100 bills. We don't carry $4,000. So where is it? This is a raid of a drug lord in Mexico. I don't know if you can see that pile of stuff in the corner of the slide. It is $200 million in $100 bills. And the little piles in front are 500 euro notes and 10,000 yen notes. Okay, so criminal activity is enabled by cash. And indeed, and it's incredibly interesting, that some people are calling for $100 bills and $50 bills to be digitized. So to get rid of the paper, make it completely digital. And I think it's really interesting because they haven't really thought it through that we've had digital currencies before. The problem with doing that is that you can make a perfect copy. And so just like an MP3 or a picture or a DVD, you can copy it. So the way to deal with that is to deal directly with Bitcoin. So it's interesting that even some mainstream people recognize the criminal activity that's going on with cash and need to deal with it in some other way and are calling for digitization and effectively making the case for Bitcoin, which they might not even understand that they're making the case for it. Okay. The fourth one is a lack of security plagues Bitcoin. So a typical example here is Mt. Gox. Okay, so they reported in February 2014, 850,000 Bitcoins were quote-unquote missing. Okay, so in the press, I was quoted as saying that this is the largest bank heist in the history of the world, with one possible exception, and that is Saddam Hussein's son did a quote-unquote withdrawal from the Central Bank of Iraq, and with tractor trailers pulled out $1 billion of cash. So you could argue that that's not a theft, it was more of a withdrawal, but this one was big, even after they found some of these Bitcoin. So Mt. Gox basically suggests a security problem, but look, Mt. Gox is a third party. And again, people don't understand that. So with the new technology, you're going to have third parties that are dealing in Bitcoin. And some of these companies are going to be good companies. Some of these companies are going to be bad companies. Mt. Gox was a bad company, and it failed. A lot of people lost money, and that's unfortunate. Frankly, the problems with Mt. Gox were known well before this giant heist. It was the second heist from Mt. Gox. So you put your money with an organization or a company that has a history of issues, then buyer beware, I'm sorry. So I think that in the future, as Bitcoin progresses, there are going to be fewer problems like this. Okay. It's also the case, in my opinion, that the security issue, it's actually not a critique of Bitcoin. Security is the main strength of Bitcoin. So there was an article in Forbes about a year and a half ago saying that the computing power of the Bitcoin network exceeded the combined power of the top 500 supercomputers. So I updated that calculation, and to break into the blockchain presently, you'd need a total of 1.7 million petaflops of computing power. Okay, 1.7 million. The fastest supercomputer is in China. It's 33. The second fastest is 17. So you do the math, and gee, it's not 500, it's 50,000 of the fastest supercomputer to match the processing power. Okay, so this is in Forbes, but this is a respected magazine, but it also shows that you really don't understand what's going on. Because a flop is a floating point operation, 3.3 times 4.7. And for what we do in Bitcoin, you don't need floating point operations. So you need specialized machines, basically, that have a lot of power, but a more appropriate measure is the hash rate. Now, it isn't 50,000 supercomputers, but still, the hashing power of the network right now is about 150 million gigahashes per second. Okay, so it is, the basic point here is it is very secure. It's very hard to go in and actually add a block to the blockchain. Very difficult to do. And indeed, even if you added it with all this computing power, what would you put in it? Okay? And whatever you put in it would probably be ignored. So this is very secure, and this is actually a strength. Okay, number 5 or number 6, I forget where I am, is the critique that mining is a waste of energy. Okay? It is true that miners take a lot of energy. Indeed, this is the reason that mining farms are springing up in areas that are basically where the power is cheap. So either hydroelectric power or actually Iceland. And this is a picture of a mining farm in Iceland. Iceland's got basically unlimited geothermal power. So it's hugely underdeveloped. So it kind of makes sense if you're going to do mining to locate in Iceland. But the key thing with the mining is that it's just not a trivial, wasteful sort of endeavor. The mining is critical to the security of the whole Bitcoin network. Okay, this is what makes the blockchain such a special thing. You can't go in and make retroactive changes to the blockchain. The miners are serving an incredibly important role in basically making this a secure repository, a common knowledge, potentially, for our civilization in the future. So this is something that can't be hacked with conventional methods, at least, and I think that to call it a waste of energy basically indicates a complete misunderstanding of what miners actually do. Indeed, some of this is coming home. It seems almost every week there's a story about a breach. It was just yesterday, what is it, Super Value, and a number of months ago, Target lost 40 million credit cards. Okay, so a security breach. This is the sort of things that don't happen with Bitcoin. That's, given that you've got such security with the blockchain, that this is what we're trying to actually eliminate. Okay, everything I've said so far is a myth. Well, there's also a few facts. So, number 1 fact is that Bitcoin is too small today to be an important economic force. That is true. Okay, so if you look at the transactions that go on in Bitcoin, over the last 12 months, I think it's about $24 billion. Okay, that is approximately, so that's over a year. It's approximately 1 day of global credit card volume. And global debit card volume is greater than credit card volume. And then you have to count cash transactions. You have to count checks. You have to count wire transfers, or ACH. So you put that all together, Bitcoin's annual volume is a couple of hours in the big picture. Okay, so Bitcoin is very small. Okay, and I think the best way to measure size is by the turnover, the volume, not by the Bitcoin value multiplied by the number of Bitcoins. That's what, 6.4 billion? And it's very misleading because it assumes that you could sell every single Bitcoin at the current market exchange rate, and you know that's not true. So if somebody dumped a lot of Bitcoin, the price is going to go down. So the best way to measure this is looking at the transaction volume. And it is very small. And notice what I say, Bitcoin is too small today. Okay? This is the key word today, because really what we care about is not necessarily what's happening today, but what's going to happen tomorrow. If you look at the trajectory, this is something that could be a very important economic force in the future. Okay, so separate out today from the future. Indeed, the reason that we're here today is a lot of us see the opportunity for Bitcoin in the future. Okay, so this is a fact, but it's a fact today, and it's not a permanent sort of statement. Okay, the second fact that is, in my opinion, a very serious problem, and that is the volatility of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is hugely volatile. It is approximately 7 times more volatile than investing in the stock market. And indeed, for this reason, it currently fails as a store of value. So one of the requirements for a successful currency is to be a reliable store of value. If Bitcoin is not, it's too volatile. To give you an idea of what I mean by volatility, the kind of the 95% confidence interval for a 1-week hold of the S&P 500 is like -4% to +4%. For Bitcoin, it's -32% to +32%. Or one more. If you look at the S&P 500, it was first constructed in 1957. You look at every day's return. The largest drop in the history of the S&P 500 was on October 19th, 1987, and it was like -20.47%. The second largest drop was less than 10%. Okay, so think of that -20%. So over 4 years, not since 1957, but over the last 4 years, Bitcoin has had 13 days where you have a return of less than 20%. Okay, so 18 Black Mondays, or 13 Black Mondays. Okay, so this is very volatile. It is an issue that needs to be solved, and I know a lot of people are thinking about this issue. It needs to be solved for Bitcoin to go forward, because right now it is very volatile, and notice the word currently, too volatile. Okay, so right now it is too volatile. A number of people are thinking, again, as to how to deliver stability so that there can be some store of value function. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about is this myth that Bitcoin is just another currency. And this is a great quote. I read it and laughed. Well, maybe it's not that funny to you, but it's the CEO of MasterCard. The world is not short of currencies, so what is this currency solving for? And I laugh because I'm wondering, is this spin by MasterCard? Or is this guy, who's the CEO, not understanding Bitcoin, which is extraordinary because Bitcoin is the major disruptive threat for currencies, for credit card transactions. Okay, so does he not get it, or is it just spin? So I think that the biggest misunderstanding of Bitcoin is that it is just a currency. So again, you see those pictures of Bitcoin, and people think that we're just going to use it as a currency. And what they don't see is that probably the greatest value in the future will come from the blockchain itself. I called it a common repository of information, common knowledge, a way to verify ownership. It is a way to potentially, in a secure way, attach conditional contracts. Almost everything I do in finance, stocks, bonds, derivatives, all of those potentially in the future could be attached to the blockchain. It is potentially a massive disruptive force. And people are focused on the ATM and the shiny Bitcoins. So yes, there is a hurdle to understanding Bitcoin, and very few people understand Bitcoin, while even a smaller fraction have gone beyond Bitcoin as simply a currency and thought about Bitcoin going forward and harnessing the power of the blockchain. So let me conclude by just talking very briefly about what I have to deal with in education. So I teach crypto finance, and I criticize the media for not really understanding, and it is painful to have to spend an hour on the telephone with a reporter to explain the basics of Bitcoin. Well, I can criticize my own profession too. This is Paul Krugman, Nobel laureate, runs the New York Times column, Bitcoin is evil. So this person doesn't understand Bitcoin. It's clear if you read this article. So you've got people in my profession, my colleagues, that just brush it aside saying, oh, it's a bubble. It's not going anywhere, it's a fact. Okay? And they haven't bothered to actually dig and understand what's actually going on. So I do teach this course in crypto finance. It is part of international finance. I try to prepare my students for the future. So I try to give them an edge on stuff that will be important in the future. So this is something that Bitcoin and Bitcoin Network solves important problems, and it is not going to go away. So the idea of crypto finance is not going to go away. Bitcoin itself probably needs to adopt, to change, and it might not even be the model of the future, but the basic idea of crypto finance is not going to go away. It is a powerful idea, and basically my job in a very simple way is not to treat it as a black box, and to take my students and basically open up that box and peer inside. Okay? And I believe this is very important for the future of Bitcoin. It cannot be a black box. It's not going to work if most people don't understand what's going on. So there is a lot of work to do. This is an embryonic technology. This is something that is good to get in at the early stages. But we need to do a lot of work to actually communicate the basic ideas and to get rid of this black box. It's dangerous, and it basically repels people from what I think is a new and exciting technology. So I think I'm almost at my time. I could maybe do one question or two, if there are any. Yes?
Have you looked into, or do you already teach this on like Coursera or any of those types of websites, and do you think that would be worthwhile?
So I do have a series of videos on Bitcoin. I've not done a Coursera, and indeed it was my first time doing the crypto last year. And this year I'm going to change the course. So I'm going to bring in, because it was a business course, so now I'm going to bring in law students, and I'm going to bring in computer science into the course. And basically, it's going to be really interesting because there'll be a group project, which will be to propose a new business. It'll be like a giant hackathon. And the students are really excited about it. Because you can't grade it in the usual course because the cryptography stuff is trivial for the computer science students, the law stuff is trivial for the law students, but when you put them together into a group and actually get them thinking about venture, like a real venture, I think it could be powerful. And that's impossible to do on Coursera. There's no way to do that. So I think I do have these videos that are available, but the actual teaching of this is, you can definitely, there's lots of computer science courses out there, but I think it is a gap. I can't do it alone. So I don't know of any other course that's taught at any other top university in this area. So that needs to change. Yes.
Suppose Bitcoin becomes very popular and widely accepted in the United States. What effect will that have on the United States currency?
So probably it won't have much of an effect because the U.S. currency is the numeric currency in the world. Okay, so it's the world currency, effectively.
What if it